Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel that takes on all kinds of issues related to difficult relationships, narcissistic people, and narcissistic personalities. Today we're going to talk about a dynamic that often arises in these relationships, and it has to do with a certain form of dissonance. It's this idea that, when we have a lot of investment in something, we want to make it work out. Okay, it's sort of this sort of dissonance around, I've already invested this much, I want to keep in the game. So let's talk a little bit about this, because the way I'm approaching this is it's a dissonance of winning the narcissist over, and then because you work so hard to win them over, wanting to keep them. So I'm going to put this to you. It's the story of the monkey and the coconut. I'll tell you about that story at the end of this video. So sometimes we hold on to things we fight for, not because they're good for us, but because we worked so hard to get them. I think as the old saying goes, it's good money after bad, though I prefer to think of it as bad money after good. Now, an element of love bombing that often gets overlooked is the hard to get phase of the love bombing. It doesn't always happen, but it can happen quite often. You will see the dashing, attractive, narcissistic person across a room. They may not be available to you. They may not be paying attention, or they may be looking and looking away. Maybe they actually aren't available. They have a partner. They may not really be showing interest in you. And fate on that night that you meet the dashing narcissist may not be your friend, and the best laid plans get thrown off. It just seems that it wasn't meant to be, and you are bummed out because you only got a little bit of a taste, a tiny nibble of the charm and charisma offensive. Enough to entice you, but not enough to offend you. Maybe you even tried to stay in touch with this person, but you kept missing each other due to bad timing, a missed call, a missed message, somebody was out of town. Another pattern that you may have experienced is the approach avoidance pattern, which is so classical in narcissistic relationships. You reach in to the relationship, and that's exactly when you really start reaching in more. They pull back. When you pull back, all of a sudden they become interested and they reach in. All of this, the bad timing, the plans falling through, the approach, the avoidance, the dance. So when the moment comes that the charm and the charisma of the narcissistic person meets good timing, and there's more approach than avoidance, eureka! You think you have found magic. The slipperiness of the narcissistic relationship plays out during all phases of the relationship. The love bombing, the devaluing, the discarding. The narcissistic person pulls away. They gaslight. Or in the early phases of a relationship, you don't get to partake as much, right? They're hard to see, hard to get. It makes the allure of them all the more powerful. We always want what we can't have. And this is one of the dangers of the narcissistic relationship. They play upon the fearful scripts of the one that got away that so many people have. And that idea, oh, this is the one that got away. If for any reason they come back towards you, you may blindly fight for them. The storytelling of rom-coms and fairy tales and love stories, you know how those all unfold. People almost missing trains, or almost missing planes, or actually missing planes, or Cinderella's shoe, and every other love story that's made all the more profound or hampered by bad timing. It means that when you finally get your turn, your crack at bat with the narcissistic person, and that narcissistic person is back, or they seem like they're more interested, they do their own hoovering. This time, you don't want to lose them. Many people will say that they worked so hard to get the narcissistic partner into their lives, or put so much effort into the relationship. For example, doing it long distance, or they waited so patiently, or the timing felt like a once-in-a-lifetime situation, or the narcissistic partner finally got out of their marriage or whatever long-term relationship they were in or dating relationship they're in, that once they kind of get their prize of the narcissist now with them, that people force the relationships to make them work because they feel like they work so hard to get them. The challenges of getting the narcissistic partner in the first place can really play heavily into the cognitive dissonance. I'm so lucky that it finally came together. You want the love story. You're like, it finally happened. This is my love story. Are you really, really going to be, grousing over them being late? So when the ickier stuff starts to seep in, the gaslighting and the manipulation and the insults and control or whatever that difficulty looks like, you justify. Of course you justify. You waited so long for this. Are you really going to let them being late or having poor boundaries or being controlling or being rageful or being pathologically jealous or disparaging your work, whatever it is, you justify and rationalize so as to break that dissonance. And it all feels right again. And all of a sudden you're able to think, this is my love story. Really? I have a love story, an epic love story, and I'm not gonna complain about a little bit of lateness. My partner's stressed. Rage, they're passionate. And gaslighting, that's this kind of psychobabble. That's nothing that's happening here. You feel as though you're pissing on a fairy tale if after all this time or all the hurdles you went through that you feel like you're grousing over what feel like little logistical details, but they're not so little. These aren't just small logistical details. They are red flags. They are your sense of reality, and it can be easy to get caught up in fighting hard to make it work after how much you did to make it happen. And when you throw in some trauma bonding and legacy issues in there, well, there you go. Needless to say, you are in trouble at that point. It's the preservation of the love story after all the hurdles that get messed up when the narcissist starts behaving badly, right? You think you've got your love story, and then you've got it all figured out, and then they start behaving badly, right? That's the big cognitive dissonance. And many people will just try to rectify the dissonance by not only justifying, but perhaps even doubling down. For example, saying, I'm going to make this love story work, so you know what? We're getting married, or they'll move in together, or have children, or move far away to be with this person. By doing these big ticket things as part of your big love story, it creates a distraction, a smokescreen that allows you to focus on a wedding or buying furniture or picking out baby names instead of addressing gaslights, emotional abuse, and contempt. Then one day you look up and the mess is far bigger than you can imagine. You can imagine crawling out of, you can't even imagine crawling out of this mess. When you do the actual post-mortem of the relationship, it makes sense. And you may even be able to feel that sense of anxious urgency that accompanied the early days of the relationship. The chaos of the early parts of many narcissistic relationships means that people often eagerly await or even rush into the decisions that can make the chaos feel more stable. Moving in, getting engaged, doing things that feel like planting a flag, but are just masking the difficulties that keep popping up. The slippery beginnings, the hard to getness, them playing hard to get, the odd timing, the triangulated chaos, all of these things that often accompany a person who's narcissistic can actually really, really play into the fantasy of being the one who finally wins, who gets the against the odds big love story. Too many people come out of childhood with the fantasy of wanting to be chosen, and for someone to make an effort or for the story to somehow work out. Remember that narcissistic relationships tend to have more of these chaotic bumps and grinds and shimmies early on. And people who are narcissistic, they sure do love a chase. Nobody wins in a chase. Let's face it, once the gazelle gets caught, it's checkmate. I suppose one could argue that the lion gets their dinner. Chases are only intriguing while they are happening. But once they're over, it really just sort of settles into contempt and destruction. There is a saying in an Indian language the language that my family speaks, and basically the way the saying translates into someone being a monkey with a coconut. My mother would say that when someone got something, okay, that they didn't know what to do with, they'd be flummoxed by this thing that they have, right? And so the example in this story that she would use, she'd explain to me that monkeys would sometimes scramble up the trees and fetch the coconuts off the trees, or they'd find them on the ground. But once the monkey had the coconut, the monkey actually couldn't figure out how to get the coconut out of the husk or crack the shells to get the meat in the water. They suspected that there's something good in there. They weren't clear on how to get it. So maybe that's what anyone is when they first land the narcissistic partner. The proverbial monkey with a coconut. The monkey is lucky, though. The monkey typically learns to give up after a while, once it can't get what it needs from the coconut. After a fair amount of frustration, obviously, trying to get it, but then they know when to quit. And then the monkey will go out looking for more fruitful food sources. Unfortunately, people may not be as clever as those monkeys, and they hang on too long despite all of the frustration, carrying that coconut around for a long time, never being able to extract food from it, and slowly starving to death. So pay attention to that dynamic. When you feel like you've had to work so hard and waited for so much timing, and everything came together, and oh my gosh, they left their partner and I'm with them. When you have all that buy-in, be very, very careful that you don't get blinded or distracted by all of that and not pay attention to the very real red flags that are in front of you and then become that proverbial monkey with a coconut. Thanks again.